And I was there with her for about 3 weeks of treatment while she was alone, declining. And unfortunately, she died with so much fear in her eyes. And, I call out this example because one of the scariest things I've had to watch during this pandemic are patients that decline in the hospital away from their loved ones, not being able to allocate their time for quality of life, and instead transitioning into a phase of dying, whether from COVID-19 or just their comorbid disease, with fear.
Hello, and welcome to A Work in Purpose. Do you see people who are living their purpose and wondering to yourself, how did they get there? Are you wondering what is your purpose too? Me too. That is why I am inviting you to join me on this journey. A Work in Purpose is our podcast for igniting and reaching our purpose together. On most weeks, I'll be sharing a podcast episode of me interviewing people from all walks of our life who are working towards some kind of purpose, whether it is with their career, volunteering, creativity, spiritual practices, or just how they approach everyday life. We'll also dive deep into their stories to uncover what obstacles they had to overcome in life to get to where they are today. By hearing their stories, I hope you will learn from their journey and be inspired so you too can become a work in purpose. Each week, there's a new episode released with a different story, so please subscribe and join our Facebook group, A Work in Purpose. Because of COVID-19, we all had to come face to face with the harsh reality of mortality. If we were to die tomorrow, would we look back at our lives with regrets? Would we face death with fear or acceptance? Our guest today is Dr. Ivy Akid. She is a palliative care doctor. That means she takes care of patients who are seriously ill and who are about to die. In this episode, we discuss what Dr. Akid hears from patients who are dying, their dying wishes, their regrets, and their understanding of purpose. And we also discuss why Dr. Akid decided to go into palliative medicine, which is probably the most bleak medicinal field out there. How her upbringing as an immigrant-only child of a widow mom and being her caretaker shape her sense of purpose today. And finally, if you want to become a doctor one day, hear her tell you what they don't tell you as you're training to become one, and how she had learned to avoid burnout and the pitfalls of perfectionism the hard way. I hope this episode gives you a different perspective that will give you more clarity on your journey in becoming a work in purpose. Hello, Ivy, a kid. Welcome to a Work in Purpose podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, doing well. Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you on. Gosh, 2020 has been such a crazy year, and I bet for you, as a palliative doctor,
Yes,
you've
yes.
seen a lot this year, and it has been probably must have been a very challenging, demanding year for you. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, can you tell us more about what this year has been like for you? And
Well, first off, I would like to thank you, Ling, for honestly just creating this platform, especially during this time when the topic of purpose is so important. I think just allowing time for people to share their stories is so significant and can have such a huge impact on people. And I think the theme of purpose is so inviting to listen to, and it can certainly inspire so many to find their own purpose. So thank you for allowing this time for me.
oh, thank you for being a part of this.
So I guess I'd like to kind of start off by explaining what palliative medicine is. I'm not sure for the listeners out there if they've heard of palliative. The topic of purpose, I will say, is entirely relevant to what I do. I am a first year attending doctor at Johns Hopkins Hospital, the main campus, and I'm in the field of palliative care medicine. And so what our team does is basically take care of people who are very seriously ill. We are experts at symptom management, so things like pain control, anxiety. We also offer a bridge of communication between the medical teams and the patients and their families while they're dealing with, all the nuances of the medical world as well as their terminal illness.
Mhm.
So really, we provide a support to everyone involved in the journey of the serious illness, with the focus being on the patient and what they want.
Mhm.
A part of what we do does include hospice. So this is for patients that are really at the end of their life.
Mhm.
But it's only a portion of what palliative care, the big umbrella, does. I can say in my day to day, what I do is I lead an interdisciplinary team,
Mhm.
um, members of social work, junior doctors, chaplain, essentially, which I teach, and we all care for the patients together. Okay. And I'm also a daughter. And a wife, and I'm working on creating a family. So that's just a bit about, who I am.
Nice. Yeah, that's a very great explanation. Can you tell us more about how COVID-19 has, what was that like last year?
Right. So to segue into kind of how the pandemic has affected our particular patient cohort, I'd like to preface that just given the nature of my work,
Mhm.
I am constantly reminded of my own mortality
Mhm.
and have learned that death is really just another phase of life which everyone will face, right? The question is, do you want to be in control of what that phase might look like? Okay, the dying process is unique to everyone. And generally, people rarely at the face of death think about regrets of not working enough, what their retirement fund looks like, the status that they hold. Of course, everyone is different, but many share that they think of relationships, wish they've cultivated more meaning and time connecting with family and their lovers and people. And I can share one experience, I guess, during the pandemic, which really highlighted just kind of the craziness of what has been going on in our lives. A patient that essentially had a very unexpected, rapid decline. Um, Really just wanted to fight and do everything possible with all the medical interventions to stay alive.
Mhm.
And I was there with her for about 3 weeks of treatment while she was alone, declining. And unfortunately, she died with so much fear in her eyes. And, I call out this example because one of the scariest things had to watch during this pandemic are patients that decline in the hospital away from their loved ones, not being able to allocate their time um, for quality of life, and instead transitioning into a phase of dying, whether from COVID-19 or just their comorbid disease, with fear
Mhm.
and without support. And I think that, that has been one of the, I guess, the bigger impacts in at least in the hospital and our field.
Would you say a lot of these people who are having these questions
Mm.
at the end of their life, like what sort of spiritual questions
Yeah.
are they questioning there and then, and what sort of
Yeah.
insights do you give them?
Yeah. I guess I can say there's a couple of things. There's one thing I've noticed, there's a primal instinct for humans to just live,
Mhm.
right? I don't know if that's for the people that they don't want to necessarily leave behind or just the value of time, that time can give them to create more in the world. I don't know, right? I do think that purpose itself can be very ambiguous, so that the purpose can be as simple as the will to live. It can be as simple as dying a peaceful death, right? Its purpose is not stagnant, it changes with time. It can be multi-purpose, right, depending on the season. Some patients with terminal illness, um, when dying, life is less about having a purpose or an overarching reason, right, to exist, and more about approaching a quality of life, right? Instead of chasing the clock, making the moments count. I think that, the finality of time forces people to confront their values and budget their time. So it's not even about trying to establish a purpose, rather about living purposefully.
Hmm.
And another thing that I took away is that, you never really know what motivates people, right? So if you were to ask me, I would say family. But I can recall a patient early on when I was doing palliative. I had a patient, I asked, what brings him meaning? And his response was playing golf. At first I thought this was very odd. Um, but as I listened, he explained getting up every morning, the routine of walking out, in the fresh air, connecting with his friends, having a sense of calmness and focus, of aiming his swings, that gave him something to look forward to and gave him a drive. And for him, he wouldn't be truly living without golf, right? And that really stuck with me because what brings value to someone's life is so distinct to everyone. And the necessity of having something that is validating and having a purpose, I think, is common to all of us, regardless of, faith or religion. It's a human thing, right?
Hmm. That's a great story. So, with the pandemic, there's been a lot of cases and hospitals are at capacity.
Hmm.
How is it like to manage all of that as it was going on?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, the volume has been very high, and I think for healthcare workers, it really calls into question like what our driving factor to go into medicine is, right? Because just being in medicine, there has been so much sacrifice in our lives, and now we're kind of at the brink of it. We're kind of called into looking at risking, our family's life's health, if you look at it. Not our own health, not just our own health, spreading the disease to our patients, spreading the disease to family. So I think that the threat of the pandemic definitely placed things into perspective and really helped me to kind of prioritize what's important, I would say.
Mhm.
Just given like the nature of the high volume and busyness in the hospital itself.
So, what have you come to realize are your priorities now?
But I mean, I would say I don't think my purpose or one calling is necessarily in my work. I definitely think it is an avenue which allows me to kind of explore a deeper purpose, while also helping others. And I get to explore patients' stories, like I mentioned. I do think that my core purpose is really just kind of exploring, learning, creating, exploring humans' connection with nature, with music. I think through this kind of exploration, I try to create a mark of my own on the world.
Mhm.
Um, a big part of my purpose is even just building those bonds and relationships, connecting with you, right? Someone I've known for so many years. I think that there's, I guess, the conduit to reach the purpose is ever changing. Currently, I do, in terms of my academic work, I see myself really being an advocate for women in medicine, um, through teaching, hopefully inspiring, relating with the challenges of just being a minority woman in medicine, and trying to have a family, trying to have it all. I do research in gender disparities and areas of medicine where women are underrepresented. In general, I think women are underrepresented in health and policy.
Mhm.
Um, so, particularly, what I do in terms of the research is in geriatric and the palliative cohort, specifically gynecology, oncology. and some budding research ideas on fertility as well. But a lot of these things are, still kind of going on and at play.
What are some tests you're trying to find out more about?
So one of the things, so studies show that women face challenges and barriers which really take a toll on their health. And this leads to a higher morbidity, so even depression, which is actually twice as likely in women. And then that rolls over into broader health issues in the older adult. So even though we know statistically that women do have a longer life expectancy, but they are actually burdened with more disease.
Interesting.
Um, yeah, and so specifically, like I said, I'm researching gynecology, oncology, so women that have um, s- either like uterine cancers, ovarian cancers, which can actually come in the mid 40s, um, which is very young, and depression. I also look into things like osteoporosis, which affects women double the amount and can lead to not just burden on the healthcare system, but also just significant morbidity in women. So my areas of research are kind of looking into that. And just to tell the listeners, I guess, about me and sort of how I grew up. I grew up predominantly in extremely humble beginnings. Um, my dad passed away, no siblings, mom being an ethnic minority, working, studying to support us in a country where she did not really know the language, or have others to lean on, either both emotionally or financially. So I would say, despite how vulnerable she was, her perseverance, her grit, her strength, that really allowed her to kind of work and study and give me opportunities, right? Um, she instilled values of education. Deeper than that, though, really just a sense of autonomy, and grit to overcome challenges. And, my personal experience was having little support and times where I actually worked 2 to 3 jobs,
Mm,
between waitressing and even professional jobs in chemistry labs during school, while maintaining this ambition for medicine. So a lot of my challenges were financial at a certain point. But I also became a caregiver for my mom,
mm,
as well, because she was not, she unfortunately was this, I guess, fell into the cohort of women who have struggled for so long and then had depression and
mm,
had, significant disease. So I think that's part of what ignites the fire in me to want to study this and just be a voice,
hmm.
for women in
Where was
this.
where was your mom from?
Like the country,
Yeah.
Bangladesh.
And when did she come to America?
She came, I would say, in her, I guess she was in her 30s,
Hmm.
early 30s. Yeah.
Okay. And you were born here, and then your dad passed away in America?
Yeah. Mhm.
How old were you?
Uh, well, it's, I was very young. I
Mhm,
was very young. He was not in my life at the age of 4, I would say.
mhm. At the time when you were 4, that
Mhm.
was when you learned about death, or did you not understand it at the time? What would you say?
Well, because I was so young, my mom kind of just said he's gone. And I don't think I really understood death at that time,
Mhm,
but I definitely understood loss.
mhm. What was your process in terms of slowly realizing that,
Mm.
"Okay, this is what death is. This is what really happened to my dad?"
Yeah, that's such a complex. It's so complicated, honestly, just because of the I guess not just the loss of my dad at a young age, right? But also the shift in the dynamic of the relationship I had with my mother.
Mhm,
I think that was probably because the residual of, right, of losing someone is now shifting the focus into the new life. Um, and I think that sometimes it also highlights the different relationships that you currently have. And I just remember, it was definitely someone that I now leaned on more heavily, I would say. Obviously, there's a natural closeness that comes about with that, because now it's just you and the other person, right? And now just kind of dealing with the ups and downs through that relationship itself.
Mhm. Yeah. Did your mom have, like, a support system back then? Did she have other
She
family
did
members?
not. She did not, unfortunately.
Mm,
Yeah, and I think that was what was hard, is because excuse me, she used to go and work, right? And to make ends meet. And so the really I was by myself. Really,
mm,
I was by myself. Yeah.
mm.
And maybe I had all this time to kind of, to read and explore and, just do um what I love, like music and creativity and, um yeah.
Yeah, I can relate. My mom passed when I was 6, and my dad was always working, so I had to draw in my room
Right.
and create my own
Yeah.
world. Did that kinda inspire you to go become a doctor, particularly in your field?
Yeah, I think that I definitely, being an advocate for women, it definitely has to do with the relationship I had with my mom, and having such a strong female role model. I think definitely helped. I think in terms of um, the pursuit of medicine, I think I was always kind of inclined to academia and helping others. Um, the the path of medicine is very arduous and
Mhm,
draining. It can be, especially for women. So I do think that there's a lot of sacrifices to be made, right? To follow the path amidst the hustle and bustle of the career and just life itself. I realized that I was not sort of intentional about my own health, my
mm,
own physical or mental health.
mhm,
um I know several friends, including myself, who felt that, like, family life would all fall into place, right? But in medicine, having to work that much harder, being competitive, trying to reach this, like, perfectionism, it drains you to the point where, you can lose yourself.
mhm.
And so, I don't know if you know this, when I experienced challenges in my health. I battled cancer.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Um, yeah, I battled this term called burnout. Are you familiar with burnout?
Kinda, yeah, like, you're
Yeah.
just done with work
Yeah, it's like this built up
over it.
fatigue,
Mhm,
yeah, exhaustion over time, and it's really highly prevalent in doctors. Um, the source can be from work, but it can also be from being a caregiver, which I was, right? So both ends of my life. Um, I actually needed surgery for unseen fibroids to prevent fertility issues, and one of my goals is to, have a family.
mhm,
So throughout just kind of the journey in medicine, I learned that it's so crucial to be intentional with your plans and your goals to set them into fruition. Like, you really need to kind of harness, what you want to reach. There are a lot of things that I think, because the nature of medicine, that I didn't focus on, other aspects of my life, with which I wish I had done.
mhm. And what made you pick palliative medicine? Because, like, as you mentioned, that is not only are you dealing with medicinal issues, but also people dying, and it's like the most, to me, it sounds the most intense, most stressful area you can pick. So what made you decide to
Right,
go with
right.
that route?
I mean, to be honest, so a few reasons, right? So one, our medical system, I think, does a poor job for the people that really are the most vulnerable and need help the most, right? So I think that, cardiologists, they work on your heart, pulmonologist works on your lungs. And once there's no more to that or no end to that, once their therapies have failed, where do you go from there, right? Like, what system do you have in place, or what support does a patient have? The network, the medical team, what support do they have after there's no more what they can do for those specific organs, right? One thing I love about palliative care is we also look at the patient as a whole, right? We're not just treating like one organ, we're looking at you, we're really an advocate for the patients, learning about them, being able to bring their story into the medical world. Because, this thing about burnout, this recurring theme comes again because doctors are burnt out because they're just dealing with the science and not necessarily, bringing the humanity into it. And so I think, I love palliative for that reason. I think when I was younger and I thought about being a doctor, I think be, being a palliative doctor is what I was thinking, right? Like taking the humanness in someone, caring for them, as well as having the very cerebral, you know, um, science, using that to help patients. So I think my ideal doctor image that I had was really a palliative doctor.
Mm. So you mentioned how being a palliative doctor, you can bring story of the patients into the world. Would you say there's like an equivalent for before that in the patient's life, before they, are dying, for them to have their story be kind of expressed from a medical standpoint into the world?
From the medical standpoint, yeah,
Or
I think there's always value. I think there's always value. And one of the things about palliative care, it is a new field, okay? And
mm,
it's when the field in medicine is very new, it's also very dynamic. And so we see patients who are not just at the end of their life. Okay, we see patients who may have years to live. We really see them when there's a complexity of their disease and serious illness, but that doesn't necessarily mean that someone is necessarily dying. And I think, one of the barriers that palliative has to break is that sort of, I guess, almost like a misconception or bias that, it is only end of life. I think what we're trying to really do as palliative care doctors is bring the patient's story into medicine through whatever disease that they do have.
mm. And what can be done with the stories that get expressed? Ideally, what should be done with them?
In terms of the medical world, I think when it comes to medical decision making and making sure that we are doing the interventions that we are taking to help our patients really align with their goals, because a lot of the times I think in medicine we just sort of, right, we just prescribe a pill, right, prescribe
Mhm.
pills, or do this, do that. We do things to patients, we do it to them, right? There's always a choice, but I think that that choice is not highlighted enough, right? And talking about the risks and benefits, knowing your patient, knowing if that's really within their goals, right? Um, a lot, like I will say, a lot of the I guess kind of issues that we have in medicine sometimes are we prescribe so many pills, and then you don't know that the patient is actually living by themselves, right? They don't have the proper support network or conditions of living to even timely take care of all their medications. Maybe they work, right? Like a 13-hour job, and they're supporting other people in their family. And so they really don't have like the bandwidth to do what you just advise them, right? And so, if they're feeling okay, if they're not in the hospital, then they'll just carry on. And there's that miscommunication about not knowing the patient,
Hmm.
and not knowing about their life, and what we do to them, right? So if we can efficiently kind of meld the two and communicate, I think it would be better for everyone.
Mm, yeah, very interesting. So, being in the palliative medicine field, you think about death all the time. So, how do you think about death?
And the example that I said earlier about that patient who had that unexpected decline, and just the fear in her eyes during her dying phase, not being with anyone. I think that really forced me to think about, my own mortality. And I think specifically for me, if I had that luxury, right, of knowing we don't exactly know when we're going to die of, but knowing that time was short for myself, I think, I would want that dignity of peace, a peaceful passing. And also to that point, I hope that I don't have regrets in my life. I hope that I'm able to accept that dying is natural, and it's part of life. It is just another phase of
Hmm.
life. And so I hope that I can be at peace with that. Just seeing death all the time, I think that's what it sort of allowed me to kind of come to a realization of.
And what about living? What's your
Uh-huh.
driving force for living now that you know
Yeah.
experienced death so intimately?
Well, I don't know if I experienced it
Not experience,
very
but like
intimately,
other
but
people say.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, I will say I work on myself a lot, and what that looks like is not being too hard on myself, trying to love and accept myself, being mindful of what I put into my body, being conscientious about money. I do go to therapy.
Hmm.
Um, I allow myself the breathing room to be me, in all facets, accepting that I'm not just one dimensional. Um, I try to give myself the space to be creative and do what I enjoy, discover new things I enjoy, right?
Hmm.
Um, I do think I have a drive to kind of pursue things that I want to improve about myself. Like I feel a need to diversify myself and be well-rounded and resourceful. I think I'm one of those people. I'm very okay with, being mediocre, or like okay with that discomfort, and as long as I'm working on improving it,
Hmm.
I think that's my sort of drive.
So once this pandemic is like over, hopefully this year, what's like one big thing you want to really do as soon as you can?
The first thing, see my friends, maybe visit you in San Francisco. Be able to just be in the presence
Yeah.
of loved ones. Maybe
Just
have a steak in fine dining.
gotta treat yourself. What's like your greatest fear?
My greatest fear, if we're not talking about like, inanimate objects or objects itself, I think my fear is that if I'm not true to myself, then what is this all for? And not having a purpose. I think that that is a concept that is very scary to me.
Mhm.
Other than fear of spiders and snakes and all the physical things, but
Do you still have that fear about not living your authentic life that you just mentioned? Is that still like a strong fear that you have, or do you feel like you have, okay, I have my sense of purpose, and as long as I work on this, this fear doesn't really quite exist anymore. How do you feel about it?
yeah, that's a great question. I think it's, at a certain point, you have to have faith in what you are doing, right? And I won't really know until I think the moments of the end, sort of. But I think having fear is, I guess, it's a part of it too. I I don't really know. I don't know.
Are you afraid that towards the end you'll be like one of the patients that think that you didn't live life the way you should have or
Right.
would have? Mm,
Right. Right. And I hope that that does not happen, and I'm
mm.
working on it.
What do you do to work on it? Maybe you can talk about like your typical ideal day. Like what do you do to stay center and balance and also go to work and experience all that and then decompose after how does that look like for you?
Yeah, and then like the things that I mentioned, like working on myself and in the specific situations, not being hard on myself. Um, and I guess the day to day for me, what matters is working out. I've recently adopted a plant based diet. So that's
Mm,
something new that I'm just kind of being conscientious about because of the health issues that I faced, really. And so, kind of working on myself in the day to day with that. And also, just trying to find some time to create music. I know we both share a love for that. I've recently invested in a DJ kit, so
ooh.
we'll see. Yeah, we'll see what that sort of buds up to. But yeah, so I think just trying to be my authentic self and hoping that that is enough. And I think that is enough. I think one advice that I think I would give to the people that may be interested in the same line of work that I do is be intentional with what you want and what it takes to achieve it. Um, just having that intention, I think, is really key. You know, um, that's something that I guess I didn't realize for myself. So,
What do you mean you didn't realize it for yourself?
like I said, like being in medicine, being caught up in the um, competition and reaching this perfectionism, I basically feel like I neglected maybe, the fact that I want kids and my family life, right? I didn't think too much about that. And I ran into an unforeseen issue of, needing surgery for fibroids. If maybe I had, thought about having a family earlier, that issue wouldn't have necessarily come up. So I think it's just, if you know what you want, being intentional about it, having a plan to reach your goals makes sense. Um, sometimes we get very caught up in the things that we do and we don't necessarily want, right? Just being honest with ourselves in terms of what we want, right? And it goes back to that concept, like I talked about, is not being authentic to yourself. There's that fear of, if you're not, then you've just wasted all this time, right?
Hmm.
In
Yeah.
developing your purpose.
So what's like one practical thing people can do? Like let's say they are in the middle of their med school journey to kind of
Yeah.
how can they step out of that hamster wheel when they're in the midst of it to kind of reflect, what would you recommend they do?
Yeah, if like for example, if someone's in high school wanting medicine, they need to budget and dedicate a lot of time to studying, sacrificing social events. That's a big one for their career. I think knowing goals early can be helpful so you can make that concerted effort, right? Build your network of people as well. um, know that failure is never a stopping point, right? It allows you to adjust and become stronger, right? It holds you accountable to find a way to improve. Failures are often a blessing in disguise. I have failed several times. I feel like I failed my health. I failed exams. I failed to pursue music and art, like a part of myself that's creative, which makes me feel whole, right? So I think now, knowing what I know and being, through what I went through, I know that I have to budget my time, and be true to myself and work on these little things every day.
Hmm.
And I would say to the aspiring, young ones, it's okay to have different goals, more than one goal. Goals change, they inevitably change. And really, the biggest thing is knowing the need to be intentional with your actions and choices. And no matter what really the goal is, working with grit, hard work, you know, accepting failure as a strength, really just being persistent are key points to kind of achieving your goal.
Hmm. What's one thing you always have to make time for now that you realize that that is important for you?
I have to make time to listen to my inner voice and just accept myself for who I am, and just create the space of listening to myself, loving myself just as I would for my patients, giving them time, giving myself time. I think that's the biggest thing that I kind of took away, um, is doing that for myself.
Mm. What do you do to connect to your inner voice?
So like I mentioned, I did start therapy,
Hmm.
which also allowed me to start journaling again.
Mm.
I used to do that as a when I was younger, but I, even if it's just a little thought or idea.
Hmm. And once you start journaling, it just, ooh, my inner voice, you're back.
So I think just coming from just coming from a field where that is just so um that is missing,
Mm.
right? Just the rigmarole of medicine. I can easily it was just, a few weeks ago during this pandemic, work, you know 8 hours straight without using the restroom.
Mm.
It's a very, very easy thing, um, to really just not treat yourself with the proper respect and kindness that you deserve. It's a very easy thing to do, I think, in the nature of our work. So that was a big stride for me, Wing.
I journal too, and I think it's wonderful every morning. I think now would be a good time to go into the lightning round, where I'm going to ask you a series of short questions. You can just answer it one word or a sentence.
All right.
All right, you ready? Um, what's one thing you like to do to relax?
Listen to music.
What's one thing you like to do for fun?
Go out with friends.
What's one habit that you always make sure you do?
Read, I guess.
And what's one habit you would like to have in 2021?
Plant-based diet. Stay away from processed food and all the craziness that's in our food.
If you're not doing what you're doing today, what would you be doing?
I think maybe traveling the world and writing.
And how would you describe your ideal life? Now, this could be longer than a word.
Right. My ideal life. Gosh, there's not enough time in the day, huh? I think, okay, I can honestly answer this. Um, I would like to have a family and like to have kids, maybe two. And my ideal life would be, doing what I'm doing for the work that I'm doing, helping people, but also being able to watch, my lineage grow, my kids grow, teaching them things that I've learned, spending that quality time with really just a small creation that I've made, and that can look like family.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And lastly, what requests do you have that you would like our listeners to do?
I request that everyone just kind of takes a moment for themselves, every day, despite all the craziness that is happening in the world. I know with the very serious things like politics, racism, the pandemic, it has been such a horrific year. Um, but I think at the core to humanity is that having that humanness and the emotions, and just as you would be kind to others, be kind to yourself. That is my request.
Yeah, that's a lovely request. Be kind to yourself. We all can use more of that. Well, thank you, Ivy, for being a part of Work in Purpose podcast.
Thank you so much, Wing.
The key takeaway for this episode is the importance of prioritizing what is important in your life and to be intentional with your goals and what you want in life. From seeing death all the time and hearing so many stories of regrets from dying patients, Dr. Ivy Akid learned the hard way that she needed to take the time to take care of herself, that she needed to listen to her inner voice to realize what she wants in this life too, so she can eventually face her death with no fear or regrets. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you would like to hear more and support this podcast, please subscribe, tell your friends about it, rate it 5 stars, or even recommend some awesome guests to me by visiting aworkinpurpose.com. Please also join our community on Facebook, A Work in Purpose, where we can spark discussions and support one another in our progress in becoming a work in purpose. You have my greatest gratitude for listening. May your present moment, now and forever, be filled with light and love. Until next time, this is Wing, and you are listening to A Work in Purpose.